You're listening to episode 132, Tanisha's story, a son with lower urinary tract obstruction, Ludo. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy you're here this week, and I get to introduce you to the wonderful woman that is Tanisha. She has an amazing story, which starts off with her introducing us to her family, which she had 2 kids during the pandemic after having a medically complex kid. So the fact that she found time to chat with us is so amazing, and I'm so grateful because her energy, her spirit, and honestly the love between her and her husband brought me to tears more than once during our conversation. I want you to pay close attention to what her husband observed in the NICU as she was pumping and her son was in the isolette, and what he saw and what totally transformed their experience as parents in the hospital. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Tanisha. She gives us a little clue at the end, too, that she may be starting a podcast of her own. So I will keep you posted on that. And without further ado, please meet Tanisha. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On-Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On-Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners.
I'm Tanisha. Thank you so much, Katie, for featuring me on the podcast. I am a NICU mom of a kidney warrior, Jaleel, and he's 4.5 years old in the back.
Hi, Jaleel. I can hear you.
And then I have a pandemic 2 under 2. So I have a daughter that's a 2020 baby and a 2022 baby. So
you just had so much fun giving birth with a mask on in 2020. You're like, let's do that again.
Yes, exactly. Like it's been weird times living in as a mother, and especially when you have a child that's medically complex like I do, along with 2 under 2 in the pandemic. It's something that we're figuring out second by second, hour to hour.
I can imagine that. Well, walk us through a little bit about what your experience was like with Jaleel and your pregnancy and giving birth to him, and how you guys found yourselves in the NICU.
So I wanted to also acknowledge my husband. I've been married for 6 years, and we've been together for 8 years, and he's been in this journey with me. So I just want to say I thank him. God sent me the right person to walk this journey with, and it hasn't been easy, but we've been able to do it together as a family unit. So walking back to our story begins with me and with my motherhood journey with a miscarriage. I had a miscarriage the first year of our marriage, and I didn't realize like motherhood is very tricky. Like there is no manual to it. And we play with Barbies, we play with Ken, and we think, oh, we're gonna have this many kids. But when you get older, you don't realize how beautiful it is and how complicated it can be. So I wanted to just say that I am an angel mom along with a rainbow mom for those mothers that are listening. I lost my first baby right at 8 weeks. There was no sac. And I didn't realize it was a miscarriage until I went to go for a job and had a urinalysis, and I was bloody. So it looked more than a period. And when I went to the ultrasound, she confirmed that that was a miscarriage and that I could try again. But it really still scarred me And since then, I've had multiple miscarriages in between my children. I have 3 total. But with Jaleel, we were so grateful because we had that experience in 16. And so in 17, we were carrying, everything was going well, no issues whatsoever with the journey. We made it to 20 weeks, which was the halfway mark to 40 weeks of full term delivery. And so during that time, I thought I was going to have a boy. I naturally wanted to have a boy, girl, boy, girl. So I was so excited that we got a boy. And when we went to the ultrasound, Katie, it was just a beautiful experience until we did the amniotic fluid and basically measuring everything like they do the quote unquote, I'm trying to think, it's the ultrasound that checks all the organs.
Okay.
And so we did that ultrasound, and basically it was checking everything. And it was during that ultrasound that the doctor told me that Jaleel had a blockage in his urinary tract, and all the amniotic fluid that was around him was actually backing up in his kidneys, creating more damage. And it's basically called lower urinary tract obstruction or bladder outlet obstruction. Very unique. It happens in 1 to 5,000 to 7,000 pregnancies, but it can cause issues with kidney failure, lung disease, and really it's a life-threatening disease for babies. And so, long story short, we are in Arkansas, and the doctor tells us during that scan, anatomy scan, that's what I'm trying to get to, the anatomy scan, that this diagnosis was life-threatening, and we could terminate the pregnancy, we could carry the baby, risking a stillborn, or we could have a baby, but the baby wouldn't survive because of the prematurity of the lungs.
Wow.
And I was just so heartbroken. Like, Katie, I could not speak. And I still go back to that day where I was just crying my eyes out. And it wasn't until my husband asked for more options that the doctor said that we could go to Texas, Houston, Texas. We could go to Philadelphia. We could go to Boston. And then he said Cincinnati, Ohio. So I thought that was beautiful because I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio. So naturally, I said, that's heaven sent. We're going to Cincinnati. And so the next day, when I took out my emotions together, I called all the hospitals, and Cincinnati Children's was the only one that was willing to work with us out of state. So within a week, we drive down there and we go through a lot of tests to see if we can save our son's life, since he was 20 weeks inside of me. So I just want to pause there.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to pause. It's that 20-week anatomy scan, like you say, that so is both terrifying, and you don't know if it's terrifying when you go into it, and you're just, you're like, this is the gender scan. This is when we find out, we see baby's heartbeat. We can finally see their face. And then to have that ultrasound tech pause is like the worst nightmare. And then, you really do hear that from the doctor. Your husband was able to be with you. This was pre-pandemic when you got that news. And it sounds like, from what you said at the beginning, just what the partnership that you had, that he was really able to take on the role of like, you're in a trauma response of shock and crying. And he's like, okay, what can we do now? And I find that so interesting how such a strong relationship like that kind of ebbs and flows, and he's the strong one, and, you get to break down, and I'm sure it goes back and forth.
It does, Katie. And I will say, I can't even imagine if we had this situation in the pandemic, to be separated from my husband. I fight tears just thinking about that, because he was my mouthpiece in that most delicate time. And I see now we're in a different time frame where expectant mothers are not able to have their spouse or their partner with them. And that truly makes a difference to how they navigate through pregnancy.
Yeah.
So I just want to hold space for that.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I really needed him to speak up because I had no words to say.
Mm.
I felt like, God, I went through a miscarriage. This is our rainbow baby. So I was already feeling bright by
Yeah.
being at the halfway point at 20
Right.
weeks.
You're like, we beat the hard stuff, that's
Yeah.
behind us. And
And you said something so key, Katie, because I do want to say, like, in the moment I'm in my emotions when the ultrasound technician is scanning, but she's not saying anything. And I don't do well when it's silent. But now I understand why they don't say much, because they're not able to overstep their boundaries. They're
right.
just there to take the images. But at that moment, I was very frantic because I did not know what was going on. And I kept seeing holes, like big holes.
Right.
And my motherly gut was like, something's not right. So when the doctor came in and gave me that news, I was like, oh, I was right.
Yeah.
And with this diagnosis, for those who are listening, because it's so rare, there were two indicators that now, if I could tell any mother before they go to the 20 weeks, is I wasn't able to feel Jaleel kick. And I know as a first time mother, it takes about 20 weeks to get to that point where you feel fetal kick movement. But I had this lower pelvic pain and it felt like I was carrying dead weight. And it was hard for me to move. And I was like, well, maybe it's just the pregnancy, nothing. But because Jaleel didn't have that amniotic fluid, that makes sense.
Right.
And so when they confirmed that he had no fluid, then I was like, oh, wow, that's why I'm in so much pain. And at first I thought it was just round ligament, but sometimes it can be connected to something like that. And I just wanted to say that now I can see that parallel. But I'm grateful because when we went to Cincinnati, they were hopeful. They did genetic testing. They ruled out that it was not us as parents that gave this diagnosis to our son. They also gave us amniocentesis, where they stick this tiny needle inside of me in the ultrasound room and put fluid around the baby so that they can give them the best shot of life. Wow. And they did that a couple of times. And then it got to a point where they had to put a kidney shunt, which is like a coil straw, into his kidney so that the natural amniotic fluid can come out to the amniotic sac and increase his life. And last was the steroids. So by doing all this intervention, they are Cincinnati and Tri-Health, we are indebted to, because they literally saved our son's life.
Wow.
So I just wanted to say that.
It's like you had that moment when the doctor said, like, Cincinnati, Ohio, like first of all, the gut feelings that you're getting when you're pregnant and you're like, this back pain, like, I know I haven't been pregnant like this before, but something's going on. You hear Ohio, and then it ends up, it's literally giving me chill bumps thinking about all of the steps that got you there. When you were going through these procedures, did you feel connected to Jaleel? Like, I've heard some moms have their own experience of, it's hard. Like I got really sick when I was pregnant with my daughter, and it was hard for me to feel like I could bond with her because I hadn't met her yet. And, like there was part of me that almost blamed her for me getting so sick. And I know that's kind of twisted, but that's some of the feelings that came up for me. How did you do with the procedures and your bonding with Jaleel while he was still inside you while you were pregnant?
So it was really very difficult. And to this day, I have to say, after having 3, that there is a point where I still feel disconnected because we've been through so much medical trauma, even just the fetal care and then kidney disease and transplant and all that. So I still am working on my healing with him.
Yeah.
There's moments where I feel like I try to maximize the time that we're not in the hospital nowadays. And so we've been at the park and everything. But during the time that I was carrying him, my husband was my rock. Yeah. Like, he would play music. He would basically helped ease my mind. We would listen to a lot of affirmations. We would pray. We would cry. We were at the Ronald McDonald House, so they kind of made it light of the matter, which really helped our soul because they had activities for the family. They was showering us with gifts. I had a lot of gifts given to Jaleel before he was even here, and they were mailed to the Ronald McDonald House from family and friends. So I had a virtual baby shower,
Oh,
and
wow.
that touched my soul because, Katie, I really wanted to have a baby shower for my first child, but I still was able to receive gifts, and they were sent to the Ronald McDonald House. So
Mm.
I think that helped me feel like we're gonna have a baby, and the
Yeah.
baby's gonna make it, because we had so much love coming from everywhere around the state. So I just felt like that was God's sign of telling me, you know, I sent you to Ohio for a reason. I
Mm.
know it's gonna look kind of intense, but just hang in there, because I just knew that I wouldn't have got all that love for no reason. Just like I knew that by me making it to 20 weeks and him saying Ohio, I felt like I was hopeful, even in that heartbreak. So I think that's what really kept me connected, was just receiving the love and the support that came through this traumatic experience from everyone that we knew.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like faith and family is really what got you through those times. Do you will you tell us a little bit about your birth story and what it was like? I'm sure you had every single, it felt like, person in the hospital in your room probably when you delivered and then right after, and how did you feel going through that?
So I was thankful because the first thing I heard from the OBGYN in Cincinnati and Tri Health was that I could still have a vaginal delivery. A lot of times when you have a child that is diagnosed with a medical complexity like I did, you rush to the C-section.
Yeah.
But she told me, no, you can still have a vaginal delivery. If anything, we're going to induce you because we don't want you to carry past 37 weeks. And when it comes to vaginal delivery, by him having the unpredictability of amniotic fluid, they were going to insert some more fluid so that he can come down the birth canal.
Wow.
So that made sense. So I was still able to hold on to the beautiful experience of vaginal delivery. And the only thing that really struck a chord was the induction. I was
Mm.
terrified of the induction and Pitocin and all that. Like I knew that it was going to be magnified if I went that route. So I was praying to God, like you said, faith and family. I was praying to God in the hospital room, because there came a point where I didn't have any fluid around Jaleel. So I had to be on bed rest. So they admitted me, and I was there doing non-stress tests constantly. But one morning, it was Thursday or afternoon, I was pacing the floor, and I could not sleep, and I kept feeling some type of offness. Like I just felt like something's off. And I'm like, the ultrasound technician said, no, you're okay. You're not having contractions. I said, well, I am not able to stay in this bed. I have to walk, 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 walk. So long story short, Katie, I didn't get no sleep Thursday night. I stayed up with my husband. I said, I don't know what's going on. And then it wasn't until that next day that they served me breakfast, and I couldn't hold it down, and I threw it completely up, that I asked the doctor, can y'all please check my cervix, please? Please check my cervix. And I was 3 centimeters.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
the doctor came back and said, in another hour, if you're 5, then we're going to have a baby today. So she came back, I was 5 centimeters. So she rushed me up to the labor and delivery. And Jaleel was progressing, but I had no strength to give it. I had issues with the tiredness, so I just went on and got the epidural, but everything came out smoothly. I'm gonna pause and turn Jaleel's G-tube
Okay.
off.
Sounds good.
Yes. So I was thankful, Katie. I was super grateful to God that my body was progressive enough to have him as natural as I desired to have him. And not only that, when he came out at 1:44 a.m. in the morning, I could see my baby's eyes. And he was alive. He was alive. And that's some of the background. Will. And
Oh,
he was alive, and I'm just thankful to God because I remember what the doctor told me here in Arkansas, and to see him alive, and I know he was immediately rushed. I didn't get the skin to skin, and that's a healing process in itself. But he was immediately rushed to the NICU with my husband right after I had him because he needed some respiratory treatment. But the fact that he came out alive, like I was praying to God that he would come out alive, you know.
mm,
So
wow. Oh my goodness.
yeah, it's a tearjerker. Like I'm like, please don't let me cry a whole bunch of tears.
Oh my
I just
God.
want to
Well,
hear.
it's like, how can you not? The funny thing that is just like motherhood to a T is that, like, of course you didn't sleep the night before you begin this journey. It's like the one night we could have used a good sleep.
Right? Nope,
Just
not
to
those
know that it's just
contractions.
like, okay, for no longer, like, do you get to decide, how your sleep goes? And so your recovery then, was Jaleel, did you give birth in the same hospital that he was in, the NICU? Were you able to go visit? And what was that like?
So it's interesting that you brought that up. So when we came to Cincinnati, Cincinnati Children's is partnered with Tri Health, which is Good Samaritan Hospital. So Good Samaritan Hospital was actually the fetal medicine team that I worked with until I had Jaleel. Once I had Jaleel at Tri Health, then he was immediately transferred to NICU and Cincinnati
Okay.
Children's. But the good thing about this is that they're in connection. And that's what I wish was here. Like the
Yeah.
Cincinnati Children's and Fetal Care Services would be in connection so that it's easy to transition mom and baby back together. So while I was at Tri Health recovering, I kind of already knew what Cincinnati's protocol was, Cincinnati Children's. And so I kind of was at ease. I still had a lot of emotions. Granted, I just had my baby. I'm not holding him. I'm separated from him. But this is where my husband comes in. He's like there with him the whole time, and that gives me peace.
Yeah.
But I only had to recover for a day, and then shortly after, I was wheeled down to see him in the NICU. Immediately, you go into a lot of emotions because you never thought you would be here in the NICU, and I was very disconnected because all I saw was cords. He was on a ventilator at the time. He was on the pulse ox. Um, he was struggling. He was struggling. And each day was like, I wondered if he was going to make it out because his lungs were still compromised from the diagnosis. But thankfully, he gradually weaned off of the the oscillator, the ventilator, the nozzle cannula. It took about a couple months. And then they focused on the kidneys, obviously. He had kidney disease stage 5, but they wanted to start with respiratory first
Yeah.
and then go down to the kidneys. But I was going through a lot of emotions. I was very fragile as I could be. My husband was my rock. God used him in the most profound time because I remember I was pumping. And what I do love about Cincinnati Children's is that they encourage breastfeeding and they had lactation support. They had a private room where you could get Mandela free supplies. Even Ronald McDonald House had free supplies that you could continue your breast pumping journey should you want to do that for your child. And so that's what really helped me
Yeah.
through that fragile state. Like, what can I do in the midst of this? And that was offering breast milk. And so I was pumping, but I remember just being so disconnected. When you talk about disconnected, I was just sobbing and the rocker. And my husband was just looking at me and looking at Jaleel. And at the time, I could not hold Jaleel because he was so fragile. And the nurse was like doing her thing. And my husband's like, hey, my wife's having a hard time connecting with our baby. Can you kind of invite her in to kind of show her what you're doing? And that way she can feel somewhat included in the care, because I felt like the nurses was taking my job away from me. So I was grieving that. Even though I knew they were trying to help our son, I felt threatened because they were doing everything and I was just sitting there. So by him including the nurse to come to me and tell me like, hey, do you want to help with weighing the diaper? Do you want to help with changing, certain things of the bedding, just anything? Do you, and she knew I was pumping. She was like, do you want to give them the colostrum? And I was like, sure. That's a win. So I take the little small colostrum and she puts it on a swab, and Katie, she puts it around Jaleel's lips, or I do it. And I'm just so grateful because at that moment I said, I'm a mommy. Yeah. I'm a mom, because it's just those things that you just like, I feel better. Now that I'm included, I feel better. And from that day, Katie, I didn't feel so intimidated by the nurses, the NICU nurses.
Wow.
And my heart just opened up because they were showing me the monitors and beep, 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 beep. And what that meant, so that I wouldn't be overwhelmed, in my emotions. What's going on? Is my baby okay? They were kind of showing me what's around him so that I could be less tensed up. So it really, really melted my heart. Like I said, my husband has been in this journey with me, and he's probably going to be shouted out a lot in the beginning, delicate stage. I had nothing to give. I really didn't, in me emotionally or speak up. Like I speak up a lot now on social media, but in the beginning, I'm very delicate. So
it's such an interesting point that your husband saw. So and I've seen this too. I've seen the nurse know that the mom is emotional and been through so much and doing such an important job for pumping and having to go back and forth to their room. And then maybe the assumptions made, they're so tired, they probably don't want to help, but that may not be the case. The case may be that mom wants to get in there and do it. So you have to have the conversation. It's just about communication. And the fact that your husband saw that and made that connection is huge. I think he needs to be a NICU child life specialist. I don't know if you've told him that, but I think he'd be really good at that job.
Yeah, I call him Daddy Doula because he's very holistic. And even with our two babies, we've had the two.
You need to trademark that.
Yeah.
Oh, Daddy Doula.
Yes, so, and I wanted to say too, because I know this is a plug for you, child life specialist. That also helps me because Cincinnati Children's, they had child life specialists put pictures up of Jaleel's progress over there, and then they asked me what theme his nursery was, and they put a banner that said Jaleel, and they put it around his isolette, and it was Lion King and Bees of Courage. So I just want to shout you out, Katie, and what you do, because that really helped me, because I was able to see the progress of my child on the wall, the banners, the beads, and we would calculate how many beads he had. I still have the beads. I haven't did anything with them yet, but I still have those beads because he went through so much. But child life specialist, and then later down, they gave little toys that we could use to play with while he was in the NICU. So yes, that was healing too in this process.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's just an honor to be able to, provide families like yours with those things that make Jaleel, and he's a little baby boy, and that's a part of his story too. So shout out to Cincinnati Children's NICU Child Life Team. Way to go. So walk us through a little bit about your NICU experience was very important to you and as part of the work that you do now, right? But tell us a little bit about your medical mom journey since then. We heard his G-tube feed go off. We know he's still dealing, kidney disease is not something you take a pill and it goes away. So talk with us a little bit about that kind of day to day and how you really support yourself so that you can take care of your son getting through all of this.
So I will say, like Jaleel, he spent 157 days in NICU. He was at Cincinnati Children's for 4 months, and then he transitioned to Arkansas Children's for a couple months, and he was eventually released at 6 months old. And at that time, he was discharged with no respiratory treatment, which is a miracle, no oxygen. But he did have a G-tube because with the kidney disease, he wasn't eating as much CCs as he needed to. He was drinking almost 3 ounces, but it got to a point where he had a lot of medicines involved, so he was very nauseous. So we went on and got him the G-tube, which is very key to those that are listening, to moms that have children that have kidney issues that are in the NICU. Sometimes you need the G-tube in order to get to that kidney transplant. And so I went on, talked to my husband. I said, if this is what we need to get to that kidney transplant, we're going to go ahead and go the G-tube. So we went the G-tube route, and he's still on the G-tube. We still got some work to do, but he came on with the G-tube, came home with the G-tube, and then he also had 2 months later, at 8 months, started his peritoneal dialysis. So we came home with medicines, we came home with G-tube feeds, we came home with dialysis. That was intense. Jaleel. We came home with a lot of supplies. That's why I call myself Medical Moms of NICU. We had everything. It looked like a hospital, but I talked to other moms and we found ways to organize it so we could still keep the nursery, storage bins. We used a shoe organizer to put all the syringes and stuff, so it doesn't look like a hospital, because I was trying to enjoy being at home.
Yes. So I love that idea. Like, yes, so you're talking about like the back of the door kind of shoe holder type thing? Okay.
Yeah. That's where I would put his goggles, his dressing change supplies, because we just had a lot of supplies, and I just didn't want to see a lot of boxes. And I'm very type 1 personality. I like things organized, so I do well with that. But long story short, I was equipped with a lot of training from the dialysis team, and we came home. We were still overwhelmed, and that's where that social media support comes in, because I found a few mothers that were in the same journey as me, even though our child was a little different in their treatment process. They gave me those tools to say, hey, if you have something going on with the G-tube, you can call me. If there's a trouble issue with the dialysis, just call me, because you need that. You need that more support from mom to mom. Sometimes it's not always given in the hospital. And so just having that support and being able to call my care team should anything come up kind of helped us. But it was really a huge transition for me and my husband. And it took a couple of weeks for us to get familiar with the dialysis alone, because we never knew that we could do dialysis from home. I've only heard about the treatment center every couple of days. Yeah. So that's why I call myself a medical mom. And I created a community for it, because a lot of things would come up out of the blue that was medically related. So yes. You're
a nurse and a mom, and you're like in a clinic and a storage facility, and you've got it all going on. So I imagine that community is big. And I love what you're saying about like that first line of defense is other moms who know you, who you feel connected with. So that like that 2 a.m. text, like, is this something I need to call a doctor? Like just to have even if it's one person or two or three that you can get on a Facebook group and somebody else is up at 2 a.m. too, to reach out to. It's just comforting. So I love that you've created that space. Tell us a little bit about what you have created.
So in the midst of the NICU, talk about like self-care. Like, I think I'm just now getting to that place of self-care, Katie. If I'll be honest, I've not done a great job of self-care. I've been in fight or flight mode with my son, Jaleel, alone, the medically complex miracle. And oftentimes you do that as a NICU mom. You are so caught up on your baby. And yes, that works for a while, but eventually you'll feel the effects of not taking care of yourself. And I just felt that. I'm just now like, oh, this is what postpartum anxiety looks like. Oh, this is what postpartum depression can look like. I'm just now feeling that because I was just trying to protect him and be his best advocate. But it starts with you, especially when you don't have a physical support system. Like my family's in Ohio, they're not here in Arkansas. So over time, you will eventually feel like you have nothing to give. Yeah. And so during his process, we've always had family come in and out, especially when there was crisis on crisis on crisis, but it would never be long-term, maybe a week or two. So we've had that support, which is beautiful. A lot of people don't have that, but we're just not in the moment where my aunt is here and she's going to be relocating here to be here long-term. And that has been a beautiful thing to have because it's allowed me to nurture myself, my husband to nurture himself. We come together as a couple and then we can nurture our children and the disorder can stop, But I just wanted to say, like, the community that I created, actually, I was in the NICU and before I knew, you know how you take on a lot as a woman, as a mother, you just want to do it all. So I was actually pregnant and I was in my grad program. Okay.
What? Oh my gosh.
I was getting my master's degree in mass communications while I was pregnant.
Okay.
And when I knew I had to leave here, I told my professors what was going on. And I said, if they don't give me grace with the situation, which I knew they would, I felt that they would, then I know I should just stop the program because I knew that it wasn't going to be what I thought it would be. But they gave me grace. They gave me so much grace, Katie, that they were like, hey, you take care of yourself, take care of your baby. And as long as you turn in the work before we close the semester, you're fine. Don't worry about deadlines. You're okay. And that actually helped me have some type of something to myself that I could de-stress from medical trauma with. And I held on to that even though it was crazy. Studying for my degree at Ronald McDonald House, I did it because I wanted some type of piece of Tanisha. And by doing that, my professor, she nudged me. She said, you have a project, a graduation project on your hands. And I was like, what? She's like, you should create a virtual community for NICU moms. And I was like, NICU moms? And so long story short, I was like, okay. So I feel like a medical mom. I feel like a nurse / mom / patient worker.
Everything.
And so, yes, all the things. And so I said mass communication. So I said, okay, I'm going to create Medical Moms NICU. And it's going to be us all coming together as moms on Facebook, something that I felt I needed in that moment. I'm now creating for other moms and paying it forward. And so I created that as a professional project from my professor. And then I had to do a thesis. And I told her I was going to do a thesis on patient and provider communication because that's what my life was.
Yeah, I love that. I want to read it.
Caseworkers, all that. So I said, why not utilize this real life experience? And my Professor's like, absolutely, that's less work that you have to do, you know? And so since then, I've been able to help moms. I've sent self-care packages to 21 moms. I've created a mom support group on Facebook, Medical Moms NICU. And it's where we can share our story, share NICU advice, and be able to help each other navigate the medical system with ease, because we need that. We need each other to say, hey, this is what I did for this. This is what you should do, if you feel overwhelmed. So since then, I've been blessed to have a scholarship to fund mothers to get all about mom self-care packages, because I wanted to do that for the mom. A lot of times we shower our babies with gifts, but we have nothing. And it starts with us. So I wanted to do that because I know that's therapeutic. If you feel good, then you're naturally going to give that to your baby. So that's where Medical Moms NICU is taking off. And I'm just thankful, Katie, because you're inspiring me, because I'm actually preparing to do podcasting in the future. I just haven't done it. So I'm just grateful. I've been doing guest speaking and just supporting where I can support for my story. But I know God is calling me to embark on that too. So thank you for my inspiration.
I will be I'm sure I won't be your first because you have lots of support behind you, but I will be one of your first downloads and share however I can, because
absolutely,
I agree. Like you have the gift of being able to articulate the experiences that you have. And that can be hard to do, especially after you've processed so much and gone through so much. So if you feel called to share, I know a lot of people who will listen for sure.
Yes, I've been getting that. And it's really hard because I grieved before we had Jaleel. I was so ambitious about communications, and I'm going to work for television. I'm going to be a radio personality, and all that went to fault. But now I'm like, oh no, it's not at a heart. It's just different than what you thought,
It's crazy how that happens. It's interesting. I went, my undergrad was in communications as well. And then I went off to do child life. And so look it up. I'm back here. There's part of that connection and community within communications, which, doesn't really go away if it's one of your passions. So I can't wait to listen and see what you come up with. In the meantime, if people don't already follow you on Instagram, and if medical moms of NICU they want to join your Facebook group, where's the best place to do that?
So the best place is definitely, you can go to www.facebook.com/medical moms of NICU. Okay. And you can go in there, and there's a general page, and then there's a private group. So you want to click on the private group, and you can be added. As long as you answer the questions, we want to make sure that it's a safe space for NICU moms and NICU moms of medically complex miracles, so that we're giving resources and helping each other. And sometimes you have to do that because social media can be robotic sometimes.
Very true. You're like, why am I getting this ad in my lawnmower group? Like, what? Yeah.
Yes. And I'm just now getting back to it because my son, even after 2 years, he just got a kidney transplant last year. Awesome. And when I say, like, we lived in the hospital almost every other week. Or every week we were in the hospital. So we're just now recuperating. He's feeling better. My 2 under 2 are in a good space. So I'm just now getting back to serving my community the way I want to serve it. So I just want to say, just when you get on there, you may see a little bit, but not as much as you would think. I'm starting anew because I'm holding space, for Jaleel to recover. And I know a lot of the moms understand that because they're medical moms and they have things that pop up.
So you should. I don't think we didn't start these things to just continue on until we burn ourselves out. Like, you have to have ebbs and flows of this kind of stuff. So I feel the same, I struggle with the same thing. Next month is all going to be reposted podcast episodes, and that's just what we can handle right now.
There we go.
That's what happens. And then my last question for you, which is always my favorite, is tell us a little bit about Jaleel and who he is, what kinds of stuff he's into, his personality, like what you're like, oh, Jaleel, that is so you. What makes him him?
So if you don't mind, give me a few seconds. I'm gonna bring him over here.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Hi, cutie pie muffin. How are you?
So Jaleel, this is the kidney warrior.
Hey, buddy.
He's probably not gonna be still too long. That's why I brought him over here last. But I would say he's into music. He's into music because of Child Life. When they came, they brought a lot of music toys for him to play with when he was in the NICU. They also had music therapy where they would have the Child Life specialist, they would play guitar, and they had just different music to play with. He's getting into everything.
Yes, as he should. He's a busy guy.
He's into water because he wasn't able to play in water for a long time because he had that dialysis port and you can't infect it. So being at the splash park is definitely therapeutic for him. Being at the playground, he enjoys, going down the slide and the swings. So he's just in a better place than he was before. And we're just super grateful.
Oh, I love that. And I bet you love watching him, enjoy that stuff, especially the splash pad. And, it's just what an amazing little boy and mom you are.
Yes. And I was like, it's really hard to keep him still. That's why I was like, I don't want him to mess up the recording. But yes, he's into music and I want to put him in swim classes, but he has to be 5 to do that. We have an aquatic center, and so I'm looking forward to doing that with him. Just anything that can kind of help him with the trauma that he's been through, because he's healing, I'm healing, we're healing as a family. So I'm just trying to keep him as active and safe as possible.
Well, I love that. Well, he's lucky to have you, and I'm so grateful for today, and getting to see you and meet Jaleel has meant so much. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for having me as a guest. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that the listeners will feel encouraged that things will get better. It just takes some time, and you're doing all the things you can do in the moment, so don't guilt yourself too hard.
Okay, you all better listen to that, and that's Miss Tanisha, all right? Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/childlifeoncall, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.